Hello and welcome to my guide to the Survival Hunter in Warlords of Draenor. So first of all, it's worth saying that the Survival Hunter was recently buffed, which is very good for its performance, and it's currently a spec that is doing quite well in the grand scheme of things. Certainly you will not have any real downside from playing it. Now, it's worth just talking a little bit about one or two of the key changes in Warlords of Draenor. Killshot is no longer available with this spec, also they've removed Rapid Fire, and Serpent Sting has been moved into Arcane Shot. Essentially, whenever you use Arcane Shot, it just applies Serpent Sting, and Cobra Shot will no longer refresh Serpent Sting. So essentially, whenever you dump focus on Arcane Shot, that is what refreshes Serpent Sting now. That's the main change, so if you already knew how to play Survival Hunter, that's probably all you're really going to need to know. Anyway, time to get into the guide, so we'll be talking about the talents, glyphs, gems, enchants, and then the rotation, and all that stuff. So let's start off with the talents. In the level 15 tier, you can either go with Post Haste or Crouching Tiger, though personally I do prefer Post Haste as the run speed can be really helpful with just general mobility and getting around the place with a good level of control. At the level 30 tier, I find that Binding Shot offers the best utility of the three, however, all three can be useful in the correct circumstance. Then for level 45, I like to go with Iron Hawk. Now, Iron Hawk really is just as good as Exhilaration, but it has the added benefit that it doesn't actually need to be managed. It's just always a passive 10% damage decrease, which I think is very handy. It's hard to go wrong, and your healers will like you for it. Next, at the level 60 tier, I recommend going with Dire Beast for single target situations, as it's really easy to use. Thrill of the Hunt can actually pull ahead in a single target situation if you use it perfectly, i.e. you never cap focus and you spend every single proc. However, I don't really know if that's realistic for every scenario, so I think that Dire Beast is probably the best single target recommendation. Thrill of the Hunt is actually fantastic in AoE though, so if you're in a big AoE situation, then do go for Thrill of the Hunt. Next, at level 75, Murder of Crows just flat out does the most damage, so for PvE, I recommend going for that. And then at level 90, the choice really depends on, again, are you in an AoE situation or a single target situation? For single target, Glaive Tossed is the best damage, and then for AoE, Barrage is by far the best damage, so it just depends on whatever you're going to be doing. Then finally, at level 100, Lone Wolf is currently the best in terms of damage, and that's really it as far as talents go. It's a pretty clear-cut choice, really. Next, let's talk about glyphs. And now, a lot of the glyphs are not particularly useful to your raw throughput, but I do have a few recommendations. Obviously, it's definitely worth just having a read through the glyph book yourself. Anyway, I recommend going for the glyph of Deterrence. I think this is pretty much mandatory, because the additional damage reduction can be really vital in some scenarios. Now, the Glyph of Disengage is one that you can use if you want, it just means your disengage shoots you back a bit further. However, I don't think it's that useful because generally I use disengage to get the speed boost from Post Haste, so it's not really something that I find to be that useful. Next, the Glyph of Liberation gives like a 4% heal on your disengage. I mean, it can be useful, but 4% really just isn't that much. And then, of course, there's a few other glyphs, like, say, the Glyph of Distracting Shot, which are all useful, but just again, have a read through your glyphs. A lot of these don't really affect your raid performance in any meaningful way. As far as the minor glyphs go, again, none of them are really that useful. However, I do recommend having the Glyph of Lesser Proportions if you are using a pet, because that will mean that you won't be bugging the melee players as much. Next, let's move on to gems, enchants, and statistic priorities. So, it's very simple in Warlords of Draenor. They completely streamline the gems and enchants. You just want to go with as much multi-strike as possible, so use multi-strike Taladites for your gems, and the multi-strike enchantments for all other slots. And then the Megawatt Filament is the best weapon enchant. Now, in terms of your statistic priority, the best stat for you is, of course, multi-strike, followed by crit, then mastery, then versatility, and finally haste. So basically, if you see a bit of gear that's got multi-strike and crit, that's pretty much perfect for you. Now, secondary stats are actually pretty powerful, and when you look at a lot of the Warlords of Draenor loot, you'll notice that a lot of it's got randomized stats and various things like that, so you really do need to watch out for the stats on gear. Generally, if it's got multi-strike on it, then you can't do too much wrong, but if you're in doubt, just use Ask Mr. Robot or a similar service to weigh up what's the best choice. Next, let's talk about the rotation. So the rotation is a little bit different than previously due to the removal of Kill Shot and Rapid Fire, and then of course the merger of Serpent Sting into Arcane Shot. So your top priority for this spec is going to be using Black Arrow on cooldown. Now after that you want to use Explosive Shot on cooldown. Every tick of the dot applied by Black Arrow can proc an effect called Lock and Load, which will give you a free cast of Explosive Shot. If you do get a Lock and Load proc, then you can spend those immediately. So assuming the Black Arrow is on cooldown and Explosive Shot is on cooldown, your next priority is to use Murder of Crows and then Dire Beast, and then either Barrage or Glaive Toss depending on your talent choice. And then Arcane Shot is used to both maintain Serpent Sting and also be your method of getting rid of excess focus. Despite being so low down on the priority list, you should still be able to main 100% uptime of Serpent Sting without delaying any of your more important shots. And then finally, Cobra Shot is used to regenerate your focus. And that's really it in terms of single target. Remember, this is a priority system, so you'll see on the screen a whole bunch of abilities ranked by number. Essentially, you just always want to be casting the ability that's as high up the list as you can. So, if Black Arrow's on cooldown, then the next best thing to do is Explosive Shot. If that's on cooldown, then the next best thing to do is Murder of Crows, so on and so forth. So your best opener is going to be just to use Glaive Toss right before the pull, then Murder of Crows, Black Arrow, then Explosive Shot, and then just continue on as normal. It really is a pretty easy opener. Then in AoE scenarios, it actually just depends on how many enemies you're fighting. If you're fighting more than 4 enemies, then you should use Multi-Shot instead of Arcane Shot to get rid of excess focus. But if you're fighting under 4 enemies, then just use Multi-Shot to maintain Serpent Sting on your targets. Remember that Multi-Shots will apply Serpent Sting to enemies due to an effect called Serpent Spread. And that's really it. Honestly, Survival is the easiest Hunter spec to play, pretty much in my opinion anyway. Once you get that priority system in your head, it just sort of plays itself, and with there being no cooldown to manage or anything else like that, it's just very much getting in one flow, maintaining that throughout the fight, and not cocking up. And honestly, it's pretty easy, because a lot of the focus costs involved with playing this spec are pretty small as well. It's pretty forgiving, and it's not particularly hard. It's actually a very, very good introduction spec to the Hunter if you're brand new to the class. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.